Okay, this is just a quick look at the Tuner Studio menus. There's a lot here, more than I can possibly explain in this short video, but we'll just go through some of these to give you an idea. So under basic load settings, engine and sequential settings and general settings is where you normally set everything up to start the engine. This is the basic or the main rev limiter. There are other rev limiters available. Here's how you set up a shift light. Here's what you use for the tachometer output. You can use this for fan control or other. You can configure other wires for electric fan control. Alternator control, I don't know what that does, but there must be some interesting things you can do with that. Down here is a list of all the wires and what they're used for. I'll just click on that real quick, and here you can see where all the different wires that come out of the MS3 Pro are used. You go to fuel settings up here, and there's all kinds of adjustments you can make there. Most of the default adjustments work pretty well. The thing you're going to be tuning with mostly is this fuel VE table. This has the map sensor output on one side and engine RPM output on the other side, and basically the higher that number, the more fuel the engine is getting. This is an example of what the fuel curve or what the fuel table looks like when you get it from when you get the MS3 Pro. This is kind of a default. You can also look at it as a 3D view. Looks kind of like that, and maybe it's easier to see what's going on and adjust there. I just normally use the table. Got the same thing with the ignition settings. The ignition options and wheel decoder is where you set up the how you're going to work on the ignition. There's all kinds of different stuff on here, including NOx sensors and noise filtering. We probably won't mess with that. This is the other table you spend a lot of time with. This is the ignition table, and again, it's got map on one side, RPM on the other, and this is the ignition advance. So basically, you can put in whatever numbers you want here for ignition advance, and that's what the engine will do. Startup and idle. There's cranking settings. There's warm-up settings. Lots of stuff here. This is basically your accelerator pump stuff, and there's a lot of options that aren't enabled here, but could be enabled if you set some boxes in a certain way. If you got a supercharger or a turbocharger, you can do boost control. VVT is variable valve timing, in case you have that a feature on your engine, which we probably don't, but some people do. Tables choices, basically what this means is that you can change your timing table and your fuel table to account for different fuels or so forth, or anything like that. If you want to run on one table on pump gas and the other table on race gas, you can do it that way. Advanced engine has a whole bunch of other stuff in it, just a few things. This launch, 2-step, 3-step, and trans brake allows you to set RPM limits for all those. There's all kinds of different programmable outputs. I'm using one of these on the electric water pump on my dyno mule. Those kinds of things. I guess 3D tuning maps. Here are some of the different tables that you can use: ignition table, air fuel ratio table, VE table, etc., etc. And you can just program these things individually depending on the fuel or the ignition strategies you want to use. And this last one here is CAN bus. This is if you want to add more sensors. So you can add. There's quite a few sensors available and quite a few lines available to use in the software as it is. But for example, if you wanted to put an oxygen sensor in each primary tube, you can do that by hooking it up to something called a CAN bus, and the CAN bus is basically configured right here. I think that's most of what we've got going on with this thing. There's a lot here, but it's not the stuff that you have to modify for most applications is pretty minimal.